Hey guys, in this video I'm going to install breather bypass. This is a 2014 Street Glide Special. I got this bike about 10 months ago, and at that time I installed the Screamin Eagle Ventilator intake. Put 5,000 miles on it over the riding season and then pulled the filter off a couple weeks ago to clean it. And as you would expect, there's a good bit of oil on the filter, and I could see some oil spray on the rear exhaust pipe. This is typical, unfortunately, and the reason for that is the two breather bolts, which I'm taking off right here, have little holes in them that allow oil to pass through. You can see right there, and that oil goes down a little passageway and dumps right into the intake. Why that's a problem we'll get to in a minute, but here you'll see on the backing plate I marked the spots where I want to put the brass fittings that I'm going to install. You got to be very deliberate here. Look all around the area where you're going to be putting this. There's an idle air control assembly on the left side you don't want to hit. And so, as they say, measure twice, cut once. Measure lots of times. Just make sure you know where you want to put it. So the problem with dumping that oil back into the intake is that your pistons and valves can get clogged with carbon. It's just ugly. All right, so what I'm doing now is I'm drilling pilot holes, and then I'm just going to run through the progression of the different size bits until I get the right size for the tap. The tap is a 1/8 NPT. I'm putting links for all this in the description. The drill bit size for that is 2164. However, I did not use that. I used an 1132, which is just a very small amount larger hole, and I'm actually glad I did. This was not a fun process. First of all, the drilling, it's by no means precision. It's doable in a garage, but as you can see, I'm doing this by hand. I don't have a vise. You'll notice me lubricating it with WD-40. You should always lubricate when you're cutting metal and don't go high speed. Cutting, it's okay. I've done it many times before. You just take your time. When it was all done, I was happy with the placement of the holes and the angle and everything. But then next up is the tapping. Right off the bat, I couldn't use the pieces that come with the kit to hold the tap. So I had to use, here I'm using a vice grip, and it's a pretty small vice grip, and that's going to be a problem in a couple of minutes. But tapping the first 2 or 3 revolutions, not a problem at all. I've done this exact process years ago on an Arlen Ness backing plate for my Sportster, and I don't remember it being any issue. But after about 2 revolutions, 2.5 on this one, it just got tighter and tighter, and it became clear it wasn't going to work the way I anticipated. Now you'll notice every quarter turn or so I'm backing out the tap, and that's to clean out the debris. I continued to lubricate the tap and take it all the way out and clean all the debris off it, but it just required more and more force as I went deeper. The reason I'm not using the handle that the tap came with is that it would hit the backing plate and I wouldn't be able to turn it. Using the vice grips like this isn't ideal, but it is doable. I just am not clear on why I was getting so much resistance, and I'm sure somebody who knows will comment. So I switched to a larger vice grip and took a different bite on the tool, and now I'm just going back and forth, and this was how I had to go the rest of the way. I ended up doing about enough threads to do 7 revolutions of that brass fitting that I installed. The tap itself is tapered, so I did tap threads all the way through the backing plate, but it didn't go in all the way because of the taper. And I was never intending to screw this brass fitting all the way down. and that's because it would then be in too far and it would hit the breather bolts. But I was satisfied with being able to spin that brass fitting in a total of 7 revolutions, and that was plenty. So now you can see I'm done. The threads look good. And before I went any further, I washed this, degreased it, blew it dry with compressed air, and then when I was satisfied with how clean it was time to install these brass fittings. I put a drop of blue Loctite on each of them. I don't really think it was necessary, especially considering how tight these were when I installed them, but little peace of mind there. So I don't think there's going to be any issue with any leakage. This is not high pressure oil lines or anything like that. So, it's a pipe thread. It's designed to seal when you're tightened down sufficiently. So that's what I did. If I were doing it over, I might be inclined just to take the backing plate and these 2 brass fittings to a machine shop, say, hey guys, this is what I want where, and come back the next day and pick it up. I mean, I don't think they'd charge that much. It would be done perfectly. It was just a real pain in the butt to do it, but it's done. So next up, I've got this black RTV. I've used this on 2 previous breather bypass jobs, and it always works great. I'm squirting in a good bit into each of the passages on the back plate. I don't have a measurement for how much, but I knew I squeezed in enough to fill at least half of that passageway all the way back to where the breather bolts go. And I did this job a couple years ago on my Dyna Lowrider, and when I pulled the filter off a couple weeks ago to clean it, it was bone dry inside. There wasn't evidence of oil anywhere. And the black RTV looked the same as it did the day I installed it. I mean, it just couldn't look any better. So I have no concerns about this coming loose or anything like that. And it is important to note, as I mentioned, I cleaned this all out with brake clean, compressed air, made sure it was clean and dry before I did this installation. So now looking at the bike, the same thing applies. The threads that are going to be used to reinstall the bolts to hold the backing plate, they all needed to be cleaned. I did that with brake clean. Just be careful, the top 2, you don't want to go squirting a whole bunch of brake clean because it's going to go into your engine. So just a tiny bit on the threads and use a cloth to clean those out. Now you can see how I installed the tubing. The hose clamps are called Glarks, and I'll post a link for those as well. They're very easy to work with. I think they look nicer than regular hose clamps. So this is just 1/4 inch brass Barb fittings, 1/4 inch ID fuel line hose, and that is how I decided to route everything. So when you reinstall, don't forget the 2 O-rings. I had taken mine off when I was cleaning it. There's also the gasket on the throttle body. So with all those in place, you can start the reinstall. I had cleaned all the bolts, cleaned all the thread lock off of them with a wire brush, brake cleaned them, dried them, and then I put a drop of blue thread lock on each and did the reinstall. I like to just snug things up with a ratchet and then go back and do the torque based on whatever is called for. If something needs to be really tight, I might torque at 3/4 of the setting and then go back and torque everything final. But you could just use the ventilator instruction manual for all the different torque specs. Then came time to put the hose on, the final piece. I just routed it to the ground for now and zip tied it to the frame down at the bottom, but I'm not sure if this will be the permanent solution. I may end up doing a catch can. The issue is this hose is so close to the exhaust pipe. If it touches it, it's going to melt, and I just don't feel like dealing with that. But for now, it's safely tucked to the ground, and you're talking about literally like a drop or 2 of oil on a ride. So it's not like you're going to be doing the Exxon Valdez oil spill when you're out riding around. So that's kind of where I tucked it by those oxygen sensors and behind the fluid line for the clutch. I'm really glad that I did this. When I saw the oil in the filter a couple weeks ago, I was like, no, we're not doing this. I just don't want all that crud going back into my engine. And seeing how clean my dyno was from this mod, I definitely wanted to do it on the Street Glide. When you're standing up looking at it, you can barely even see it. Obviously, somebody who knows Harleys is going to see that hose. Again, if you don't like that, you could do a catch can. But I think the average person isn't even going to notice it. It's a pretty clean install, very cheap to do. And I really like the way it's kind of hidden out of view. Obviously, if you get down there, you're going to see it. But even on the sides, it's tucked away. And it does look like a really nice install, in my opinion. So I'm very happy with how it came out. I would absolutely do it again, just wouldn't be looking forward to doing that tapping by hand, as I said. I appreciate you watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and check out my many other Harley mod videos. Thanks, guys. Till next time.